Alright, so let's go over worksheet number 3. First problem was a warm-up problem. 1 over x minus 1 minus 2 over x plus 1 is equal to 4. So if we want to solve for x, what we could do is multiply by the LCD. Or the way we've been doing these trig functions is getting a common denominator. And then we could just cross multiply. Get everything on the same side. And let's just make sure I did everything right. 1 over x minus 1 minus 2 over x plus 1. X minus 1, x minus 1. Yep. Alright. So let's see if this factors. Factors 7, 14, 20, 28. Factors of 28 that add up to 3. Let's see. 2 and 14. No. 3 doesn't go into it. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 4, and 7. Yep, that would work. So let's see here. We could say 4x squared minus 7x plus 4x minus 7 equals 0. Cut it down the middle. This would be take out an x. 4x minus 7. Take out a 1. We'd have 4x minus 7. So 4x minus 7 times x plus 1 would be 0. X would be 7/4, and x would be negative 1. Just want to double check, make sure that you can't have any extraneous answers. This is a review of algebra. And you can't have negative 1, that would make a denominator be 0. So the only answer for this would be 7/4. Alright. So let's move on with the trig. For problem number 1, it says tangent times cotangent minus sine squared equals cosine squared. So we'll convert the sines and cosines. And this cancels. You just get 1. And 1 minus sine squared of x, we've seen this quite a few times. Sine squared plus cosine is 1. So if you bring the sine squared over, you get cosine squared, which is what we wanted. For problem number 2, we have 1 minus cosine squared of x times 1 plus cotangent squared of x is equal to 1. So, let's just multiply it out and see what happens. We get 1 plus cotangent squared of x minus cosine squared of x minus cosine squared of x times cotangent squared of x. I'll get everything to sines and cosines. And let's see. Looks like we have sine squared in our denominators here, so I'm going to have to multiply this by sine squared over sine squared. Multiply this one by sine squared over sine squared. Let's see what we get. Well, sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x minus sine squared of x cosine squared of x minus cosine it's going to be minus cosine to the fourth of x all over sine squared of x. And at this point, it looks like if it's supposed to be equal to 1, I mean, that would mean the top would have to be sine squared over sine squared, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert everything to sine squared. So if sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, then I could say 1 minus cosine, well, let's see here. The sines I want to keep, I just want to convert the cosines. All right, let's see. I think I might have took a long way to do this. I'll post an answer that's a little bit shorter. But cosine squared times cosine squared would be 1 minus sine squared times 1 minus sine squared. So bottom line is we get sine squared of x plus 1 minus sine squared of x minus sine squared of x plus sine to the fourth of x minus 1 minus sine squared minus sine squared plus sine to the fourth of x. All right. I know that these are going to cancel. So we get 1 minus sine squared plus sine to the fourth of x minus 1 plus sine squared of, let's see here. This would be minus 2 sine squared, so I'm going to write plus 2 sine squared of x plus sine to the minus sine to the fourth of x, and hopefully the top is going to just be sine squared. So these would cancel, these cancel. 2 sine squared minus 1 sine squared is just sine squared over sine squared, which is 1. All right, a little bit easier way. Let me show you. I guessed that one a little bit. 1 minus cosine squared of x times 1 plus cotangent squared of x. Well, what is 1 minus cosine squared of x? I mean, that's sine squared of x, right? And what is 1 plus cotangent squared of x? Well, that's a Pythagorean identity. It's actually just cosecant squared of x. So don't hate me too much, but sine squared of x times 1 over sine squared of x gives you the same answer. All right, let's move to number 3. For problem number 3, it says 4 times sine squared of x plus 3 cosine squared of x is equal to 4 minus cosine squared of x. Well, the left side has more going on, and looking at the right side just has cosines, right? So instead of sine squared here, I'm going to convert that. If sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, I'll convert it to cosine squareds because the right side only has cosine. So sine squared is equal to 1 minus cosine squared. So we get 4 times 1 minus cosine squared of x plus 3 cosine squared of x. So this would be 4 minus 4 cosine squared of x, which actually is just 4 minus cosine squared of x, and that's what we wanted, right? So that one's a little bit easier. All right, on the back, number 4. Number 4, it says sine of x over 1 plus the cosine of x plus 1 plus cosine of x over sine of x equals 2 cosecant of x. Let's get a common denominator first. We need a sine here, and we need a 1 plus cosine on top and bottom over here. So we get sine of x times sine of x plus 1 plus cosine times 1 plus cosine all over the denominator sine of x times 1 plus cosine of x, which turns into sine squared of x plus 1 plus cosine plus cosine plus cosine squared of x over sine of x times 1 plus cosine. All right, well look, I mean this is sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, right? 1 plus 1 is 2, so we have 2 plus 2 cosine of x over sine of x times 1 plus cosine of x. Take out a 2. These cancel, and you just wind up with 2 divided by sine, or 2 times 1 over sine, which is just 2 cosecant. And then 5 and 6 are similar to the lesson. For number 5, it says show cosine of the inverse sine of x is equal to the square root of 1 minus x squared. And we talked about this. This is going to give us a triangle. Put an angle right here. The sine of that angle would be x over 1. Using Pythagorean theorem, this missing piece, we'll call it y, would be y squared plus x squared is 1 squared. Trying to solve for y, get y is equal to the square root of 1 minus x squared. So what's the cosine of that triangle? Well, cosine would be this side over this side, right? So we just did it. Cosine of the inverse sine of x is equal to the square root of 1 minus x squared over 1. We just showed where that came from. And our last problem, problem number 6. It's just asking us to verify the tangent of the inverse cosine of x is equal to the square root of 1 minus x squared over x. All right, well this is going to give us a triangle. The cosine of that triangle is x over 1. Same idea, we're going to solve for that missing side. X squared plus y squared equals 1. So to get the y squared by itself, get y is equal to the square root of 1 minus x squared. So what's the tangent? Well, tangent of that angle would be opposite over adjacent. And we just showed where that came from. So the tangent of the inverse cosine of x is equal to square root of 1 minus x squared over x. All right, and that takes care of worksheet number 3. Have a nice day.